Hey folks, welcome to the stream. We've got an interesting one tonight, and I learned a new thing today, and that thing, well, I knew they existed, but I'd never used them before, and that is a blueprint macro library. Okay, now we'd all actually, I don't think I had created a blueprint function library in this particular project yet. I had used them before. I'd used them both in Blueprints and in C++, but I'd never used a blueprint macro library. Now, this presented a couple of issues. So let's go back to the actual problem at hand. Okay. So what we wanted to do was, in our widget, we wanted to loop round crosses, drawing crosses on basically the scoreboard, right? But if you use a normal for loop in a blueprint, it doesn't do a delay in the way you would expect. And basically what it does is it delegates out the delay and just carries on, so you don't actually get the delay. Okay, and the way to fix it is something I had done before, but it wasn't with the for loop, it was with the for each loop, and that is to create your own macro and put the delay into the macro. Okay, now it's going to be easier if I show the for loop. Now this is the one I created in the actual blueprint of the widget, right? But once we had done this, I decided that it was a better idea to have this as a universal macro, so therefore I created the blueprint macro library. Okay, and with that in mind, this is what it looks like, and the only difference is an extra input with the delay and an actual delay in the macro. Okay, now this is actually identical to the standard macros, except for this delay and the time that we input into it, which is going to feed into the delay. Okay, so with that in mind, let me show you the effect, or let me show you the effect if we don't use the macro. Okay, so if I just use the standard for loop, right, and we basically move these, and I went and done the for each loop, and that's not what we want. We just want a for loop, right? Because basically we are doing from 1 to this number here, then this is going in here, this goes in here, and this goes in here. Okay, so this is what happens when we use the standard for loop. Okay. And we got a bit of lag before we started up there. And you'll notice that all of the stuff comes in together. Before there's no, you get one doomph, one thump, and all four at the same time. Okay. So what we actually wanted to do is basically put a delay in here, but if we do that, it doesn't work. Okay, so what you actually have to do is create this macro. Okay, so we shall move our stuff again back into the macro. And that should be us. And if we now do the same thing again, and there we go. Right? So we get our nice sound effects, we get our ratings coming in, everything works great. Okay. And the last part of this is that this is no longer working off this thing here, right? We are actually working off a BML, Blueprint Macro Library. So I've cut that down to the acronym BML. And this is a little bit different from a function library. So let me show you that. So in a function library, you can use the function library anywhere in any blueprint, okay? So if you write a function that returns a number, you know, based on a number passed in, you can do that, and you can basically reference it from any blueprint. But, and the macro is different, right? You start off the same by doing a blueprint macro library, but you have to base it on a class where you're going to use that macro, right? So in my case here, what I had to do was set it to user widget, okay? Now if I set that up, right, and then we shall rename this to, let's say, stream test, okay, and then we shall create a macro called streamy, okay. Now I don't know if I need inputs and outputs for this, so let's just add one. We'll add an input, we'll make it a execute, and then we'll do an output, and we'll do the same, and then we'll just basically join them up, right? Normally you'll have inputs and outputs, obviously. So we've saved that, and now if we go to our widget, right, we can go to streamy. Okay, so we can use that. Okay, But if we went to our, say, pawn or controller in this case, you will notice that it doesn't appear. Our streamy doesn't appear. And that's because this parent class is a player controller, and we've set that macro up to be used with widgets. So if I wanted that same macro, I would basically have to copy it, right? Unless I created a base class where both of them were parented by that class. I believe that is the case, right? So it would be basically some generic class. Okay. So anyway, there, that was an example of how you create a macro library. And this is an example of how you would create a for loop. Right, now I've also got one for a for each loop, but that's going to be available to my Patreons probably, along with a better explanation and look at this code. But hopefully you've got enough from that to work it out for yourselves. And we can now delete that, and there we go. So as you can see, we've got this here, and at the moment I haven't copied over the for each loop yet. I don't know if I actually will need it, but it's there for me if I want to do it. I probably will do it, but off screen, off stream anyway. You'll notice I have set up all the inputs and outputs for it. Not this one though. Right. So, as I said, in our actual widget now, we're using our customized delayed loop to get the effect we want, which basically draws them one widget at a time with a second delay between, and then it plays the sound, etc., and that all works a little treat. So that is great. So the next thing is I want to create an animation for these. Okay. Now we may end up deleting it, but we'll see. So we are going to have to go to our individual thing here, and we are going to do that. We're going to use our event construct to play our animation. So we're going to need this at the start. So we're going to go to our animations here, and I think what we'll do is we'll try and create it in reverse and then just play it in reverse, right? It might actually be easier to do that. So we're going to say move, we'll just say move cross. Okay. We might end up deleting this because I'm totally rubbish at this. And we're going to do our image, then we're going to add a track, and it's going to be the transform, and it's going to be the scale. Right? So we're actually going to start at, let's say, at 4, right? And then let's say it's going to take 2 seconds. Now we're going to have to work this into the delay and stuff. And probably, let's do it as a second, okay? And then we'll do a scale again. Then what we'll do is we'll change these to 1. Right? So basically they're going to start that size and then it's going to basically go down to here. Now we might want to do a transform as well. And the transform might be easier to do if we move this to the center. Right, so if we actually move this to the center, right, and then we say 0.5, 0.5 to center it. Right, now we want to check that that still works. We want to check it still works without any of this animation working, right? So what we'll do is we'll press play. Right, so that works perfectly. And now what we can do is we can implement our animation called move cross, right? So we're basically going to play animation, and this is our animation. Number of loops to play 1, start time 0, playback speed 1. That sounds good to me. So let's try that again. And this is the way I do it, guys. All I do is basically get an idea and gradually try and make it better and better. And that looks pretty darn good. Right? The thing we could do though is, and this is where I say again, never be 100% happy, okay? Gradually get to where you can get it exactly how you want it, right? So I would maybe do something else here, right? Where I keep it the same, so it comes up on the screen the same for like, I don't know, 0.25 of a second, and then it gets smaller, so it doesn't immediately start getting smaller, right? So if we were to do that, all I need to do here is basically do that, right? And then leave this at 5, right? So it basically stays for 0.25 and then gets smaller over the last 0.75 seconds. Okay, so always play with these things, get the result you want, play about with it, and normally what happens is, as you play about with things and you learn about them, you'll come across a cool thing that you weren't expecting. And then basically the best idea is to take that cool idea and use it, right? So that's what we're going to do. Now, we're cool with that. That looks pretty good. Right? So let's have a look at that again, and then we'll see what we can do to make it even cooler. I'm actually nearly pretty darn happy with that. What I did want to do, right? So let's have a try with this, right? So we're going to do something with the translation. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to set this here, and then let's say we set this to, let's say 200. Okay, let's say minus 200. And let's say 200, right? And again, we'll do the same thing here, right? So we'll set those key points, and then we'll bring it down to 0, 0 here, right? So let's have a look to see how this does it, right? So it's going to come like that, and that is kind of what I wanted, right? So let's have a look to see how that looks. Alright, And hopefully this will look good. And you can see right there, that actually looks pretty darn good. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Right, we're going to go back to our level complete. Right, and I'm going to actually take this out. I don't think we need that rating. It was just an idea I had. It came from a game, right? I had this idea, right, for a scoring system, right? And it came from a game from literally 30 to 40 years ago. And you guys probably won't even remember it. I don't even think you had the platform for it, which was a ZX Spectrum. And it was a game called Headbangers, right? And it was basically inverted Space Invaders, where hammers came down out the sky and hit you, right? And as with these esoteric games back then, I suppose you did get hit in the head, hence the headbangers, right? But the headbangers reference, when it came to the score, was like somebody that was into heavy metal music, right? And basically the scoring system went on, the better you did, the sort of heavier music you liked, right? Or was the score, right? So it would start off with some like really poppy, fluffy type pop band, and that would be like for the minimum score. And then it would go up to whatever it was, Led Zeppelin or Motorhead or something, if you got a fantastic score, right? So I've always been kind of struck with that scoring system, you know, with the levels being names of stuff, right? But I think in this case, it's probably not going to work. So it would be better just to have the crosses, which is a lot kind of clearer and simpler for the player to understand. You know, you get X amount of crosses, then you get to the next level, right? And stuff like that. And I'm making an absolute mess of this one. And there's our endpoint. Right. Now, the interesting point here, and now my next point of learning, would probably be like in our individual, right, we have like this number here, okay? Now, that's all well and good, but what if I want all, like, each of the different grids? Right, okay, let's go back and have a look at this, right, to explain this. This is going in a grid panel, okay? So as each of these goes in the grid panel, right, then the X and X position is moving X amount right each time we put in a panel, right? And therefore, when our individual thing is drawn, the starting position is moving the same amount, right? But the effect I wanted was that each of these were drawn in the same place, right? So let's say we wanted to draw them from this corner or even this corner, right? What we actually want is a relative position between the position here so each of these, when it gets drawn, is a relative position rather than the other position. Now, I'm just wondering here, right, if we were to add a variable, and if we were to say offset, right, and if we were to give this a float value, I'm wondering if this value here can be used for the X and the Y, so that we can use a calculated value each time we come in here, right? So we tell it which grid position it is, we multiply that by the offset of each grid position, and then we start it at the offset, and then basically change that to nothing, right? So kind of what I'm expecting here, right, is I'm wondering if this X value, I would have to bind it. Yeah, I would have to bind it, and I'm not too keen on binding things, and you can't bind these, right? Now I would have to say we would have to use these, right? And this is offsets layout data. Okay. So this is position X and that's position Y, I would take it. Okay, right. As I said, guys, the best thing to do if you're new to Unreal Engine is to get something like this and just start trying stuff and see what happens, right? And in actual fact, right, we actually do want 5, and we do want 5. We want the 5s, but what we don't want is these ones here. Okay, now we may put these back in, right, but we want these all set back to 0. Okay, and these are already at 0. So the next thing that we actually want to try and do here is move these left and right. Okay, and we've still got a problem here because we want to bind these, but we can't. So how do we set these to a variable? Right? How do you set this to a variable? Indeed, can you set this to a variable? And it doesn't look as if we've got anything there. Maybe we need to do this. Right, so we'll make that minus 700. And we'll make this 300. Okay. Right, now, I don't know why it did that. Right, tell you what we'll do. Tell you what we'll do. We shall delete that. Right, and what we'll do is we'll set that to a variable, and for some reason we'll call it CP cross. Right, then what we're going to do is we're going to delete that, and then we're going to do CP cross, then we're going to add a track, and we're going to do transform. Now, there's a thing. And we've got some bots. We always love a good bot. I'll have to do a little bit of now this seems to be exactly the same as this. Right, so it looks as if it doesn't matter. So he's got this template sequence, don't even know what that is. So clipping which it isn't, pivot. I don't think it's going to be pivot. Could we do it with a pivot? Actually, no. this doesn't, it's because this doesn't really have, so we can bind these. I would break my golden rule of never using bind, but just for this particular thing I would actually maybe even go against my, we can bind the colour and opacity, we can bind the brush, but we can't bind any of these. Right, we can bind that. We can't bind the transform. Oh, that is such a shame. I need to do a bit of investigation into that one, guys. Right, but we're going to delete that. And there's no point in doing the canvas. Won't make any difference. Right, so we shall delete that. So we shall go back to here. And that's 5 and 5. Now I don't know. Yeah, we did the weird stuff with this, didn't we? Right, so basically we'll get that back. Right, now that doesn't mean to say that we can't still do, like, what was it, minus 700. And where was the, yeah, it's 0. 0 that out. And that's going to be 300. Right. Actually, you know what? We'd probably be better if this was set at 0. Right, and this was set at 300. In fact, what if we set this to 400? Is that too big? Yeah, it's way too big. 325. Let's went back to that number again. Right, so this basically goes to 325. Right, now this might work a bit better, or it might not. Right, we'll try it. We'll have a look, see how it goes. Press play. Onward we go. Pick up our things. Okay. So that's kind of not what we wanted. That was 325. That's not what we wanted. Undo that. Right, so that should be 0. And that should be 325. Right, that should be 0 and that should be 325. Right, and that's what we want there. Okay, that looks looking a bit better. Right, we're off to a rocking start. And it's directly ahead of us. There's something weird about this. Right. Can we... I saw a delete button there. Right, delete. Right, that'll be that sorted out. So we're at 00.5.5, right? And we're going to set it back to the start. And we'll do the whole thing again. Ah, what's this? Here's this like relative. Okay, this looks like the thing we need to actually check out. What this is. Right? But for now, we're going to delete it because we don't know how it works and it might not be exactly what we want. And it's not these offsets either. Right, so we want to delete that. And we actually want to delete that. What we want, right, we're going to change this to image cross so it actually makes sense. Right, so when we do this, we're actually doing that. Right? And then we're doing the transform. Right? And we're doing the scale first. So why are you not working? Okay, whatever. Right, so at this point there should be 0. There shouldn't be 0, there should be 1. 1 and 1. And when we go back to here, should be 5. And here, there should be 5 as well. Okay, so we'll save that. And I'm going to take a quick break, go for a smoke. If you're enjoying the content, hit like and subscribe. I shall be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere, guys. Check out the description for links to Discord, Patreon, where you can support the channel, and my previous game on Steam, which even adding to your wishlist helps a lot. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere, guys. Okay guys, we're back. So, to take this forward, all we need to do is do a translation as well. Right, and on the Y, it was 325, I believe. And here we do a 0. Then we come to our 0.25. We click the button again and we type in 325. Right? We save that. And this should give us what we want. Nearly. Not entirely. Okay, because it seems that this isn't actually in the screen. Right, so we're going to have to bring this down a bit. Until it is. We could bring the scale down a bit. We could leave it at 325, right, but have the scale so that it's slightly smaller. But hey, who wants to do that? We don't want to do that. Right. I missed that again. Straight ahead of us. Yeah, we might want to just do the scale here. Right? So we could do it as 4 and 4. And then do it as 4 and 4. Save that. And see how we go. I am tempted. Right, I think on this one, right, we go 250. But what we could do is on the X, right, we're going to remove this one. Don't know what this is about either. That's interpolation, so we don't actually want to do that. we want that selected. And delete that. And we can do the same with this one. And we can do the same with this one. Right, because we don't want anything getting done that doesn't necessarily need done. So the best thing here is just to get rid of it. And now I think that's actually okay. I was covering that up though. Damn it. Well, it doesn't take that long anyway, so. That looks good to me. What do you guys think? In the chat, do you like that? I kinda like that. And what I'm going to do, I want to check this once more, right? Because we should have our 5 thumps at the right time. Yep, that's cool. We like that. Okay. So I think what we'll do is we'll make this as simple as possible, right? I've got to do some sort of a scoring system, right? But I want it to be as simple as possible. So I think right, so if you get over a rating of, let's say, we'll call it 3 at the moment, right? Then basically you get 1 point, right? Or you get a rating of right, let's say you do it in under the best time, right? Then you get 5 points. Okay, now if you do it in under, if you also do it before the timer goes out to get to the portal, you get an additional point, right? And if you don't, that's when you're going to start losing points, right? So the best way to do this is to make this as simple as is humanly possible, right? I'm not going to try and do any complicated equations or whatever. There's no point in that if we just want a basic score, right? So fundamentally, if we go back to our pawn, right? And Pawn Chronicles, right? We're telling it to calculate the score, right? Calculate rating. Okay? Now, I did a back there. There we go. Right. So here is our calculate rating. Okay, now that's given us the rating back for the number regarding the time taken. Right, now what we should really do here is add an input here right, and we'll call it portal difference. Okay, and that is going to be a float, and we're going to do something with that in a minute. Okay, and then we're going to do something with the lives. Okay, but first of all we're going to have to do something with this. We're going to have to get this portal difference. Okay, now in our, not in our level complete, it's going to be, I'm not going to take it for the minimap here, or maybe I should. Let's have a look anyway. But what it's going to come from is, it's going to come from the portal. Okay, now the question is, where are the portals? Right, and the portal is created here. So we can look at the portal and this is the overlap. So when we overlap, we finish level. Okay. So at this point, we don't have the portal time, etc. Okay, but we are going to calculate it here, and this is it here. Get distance to portal divided by 30. So basically this number here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a variable end level count down. Right, and that is going to be an integer. Actually, no it's not. It's going to be a float. No, it's going to be an integer. We're fine with that. Right, so we're going to set this here. it's going to go in there as well. Then this is going to get put at the start. And funnily enough, we're going to do set timer by function name, right? And we're going to call it portal countdown, and it's going to run every 1 second, and it's going to be looping. Okay. And then what we're going to do is we're going to move this across to here. We're going to move that to there. And then what we're going to do next is create this function, which is going to be called portal countdown. So we shall go to the event graph, and what we'll do is first of all create a custom event, then we'll paste our name in, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate that and we're going to plug that in there. Then we're going to delete that. Then we're going to move these out a bit because this is basically the end of level sequence, right? So this will go below this because basically what we do is we get that, and then we decrement it 1. Okay. And then on this thing here, we clear timer by function name, right? Basically this, and we copy that and we paste it in here. Right, and that's going to give us the time on the end level countdown, right? And that's going to work good for us. Okay. And then we can go to our calculate rating, and we don't actually need this now because we've got it as an actual variable in our pawn. So we can get it. Right, and then we can just basically check if it's greater than or less than or whatever. Then we basically just add one, or we take one away. So basically we say if it's greater than, right, we're going to do a branch on this. Right, in fact, we don't need to do that at all we need to do is divide this. No, we can't divide it yet. Yeah, we can't do it as a float. So what we need to do is do a divide float by float. Right, tell you what. So we'll say to float. Right. And then we'll divide the float by the float, and we'll divide it by 10. And then we'll integer to int. Well, I guess we're doing that. Yeah, it's just truncate, isn't it? And then basically what we do is we add that to that. And then that goes in there. And then actually coming out of here we could clamp it 1 to 5. So that's what we'll do. We'll say clamp integer 1 to 5. Then you can plug that in there, and then basically what we can do is find out how many lives we've got left. Now the interesting thing here is the number of lives lost on this level, which we would need to calculate as well. Okay. So let's just tidy this up a bit. Do that. Do that. And we can move these over a bit. So basically what you're doing here is you're getting a 10 you're getting 10 seconds of a time to get to the portal, right? It's going to give you a certain amount of time, and then you'll have 10 seconds grace either way because of the divide, right? And that's going to be the same on the plus as well. Okay, and we should really clamp this number as well, right? What we'll do is we'll clamp this as well. To minus, we'll say minus 10, right? So if you don't get to the portal very fast, it's going to penalise you, but if you do, it's not going to give you a great score. It's not going to bump you up to a rating of 5 just because you did that, right? Your main rating is going to come off the speed that you did it in comparison to the level pars, right? So if you do it within the level pars, you can get up to 5 points here, right? Or let's say you get 3, right? Let's say you get 3 points for doing this, right? Within the third time limit, right? Now, it's not going to bump you up. It can't possibly bump you up to maximum score, right? Because the max you can get is 1 for doing it in less than 10 seconds. But it can bump you down if you don't get there within. Like if you just finish the level, right, okay, we'll take out the possibility that you get killed by the monsters, right? But if you get there, if you finish the level and then the portal comes up and then you don't basically do anything and you don't get to the portal for 2 minutes, then it's going to basically bump your score down to 1, no matter what you got here, right? So both things are important, but your initial time is more important because this also gives you a bit of forgiveness of about 10 seconds, right? Before you can go to -1, you have to be 10 seconds behind. Okay? And that's the theory behind what I'm doing here. And then of course we can work in the number of lives lost on that particular go, right? So we can work that in as well. But I'm going to call this for tonight. Sunday is always a quiet night. In fact, all the nights are... Actually, no, that's not true. The weekend nights are pretty quiet, but there are some weekday nights that aren't quiet. But what we're going to do is we're going to call it a night. And if you've enjoyed the content and the stream, hit like and subscribe. Check out the description for joining the Discord, which you're welcome to join, and check out the ways to support the channel on Patreon, and also by checking out my previous game FTD2 on Steam. Even just adding it to your wishlist helps. And thank you very much for watching. See you tomorrow at 2 PM Central. Bye bye for now.